Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimade Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Satarine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Bhashyatade Satarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham Karoti Vacharam Pangum Langhete Grim Yatrapa Tamham Mande Shri Gurum Dinakarini. So today we'll see verse number 6 of chapter 6 Dhyan Yoga. Let us chant the shloka. Bandhur Atma Atmanastasya
Bandhu
Bandhur Atma Atmanastasya
Bandhur Atmana Tasya
Yenatmaivatmana Jitaha
Hinat Maivatmana Jitaha
Anatmas Anatmanastu Shatrutve
Anatmanastu Shatrutve
Varte Tatmaiva Shatruvat
Varte Tatmaiva Shatruvat
Bandhur Atma Atmanastasya
Bandhuratmana Atmana Tasya
Yenatmaivatmana Jitaha
Hinat Maivatmana Jitaha
Atma Atmanastu Shatrutve
Anatmanastu Shatrutve
Varte Tatmaiva Shatruvat.
Varte Tatmaiva Shatruvat.
Please stand.
बन्धुरात्म आत्मनस्तस्य येनात्मैव आत्मना जितः अनात्मनस्तु शत्रुत्वे वर्तेत् आत्मैव शत्रुवत्
बन्धुरात्मनस्तस्य येनात्मैवत्मनश्चित्तः अनात्मानस्तु शत्रुत्वे वर्तेतात्मैव शत्रुवत्.
Okay. Translation and purport. For him who has conquered the mind is the best friend. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain greatest enemy. Purport. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with greatest enemy. Thus his life and its mission is spoiled. The constitutional position of living entity is to carry out order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. So, Krishna, after explaining the yoga root and Aruruksha stage, is now explaining how we can go from the beginning stage to the higher stage of yoga root by using. And the difference between these two stages is not external, like what you do outside. It's internal. It's internal means the only difference is the control of the mind. So that is all internal to anyone. There is no, whatever the external situations, if internally we are stable and we can control the mind, then we can progress upwards. So Krishna told that we should take help of mind to deliver ourselves. And Krishna has given the hint in the last verse that mind can be your friend or his enemy. So this verse Krishna is telling mind will be whose friend and whose enemy. So one who has conquered the mind will be his friend. Bandhur atma atmanastasya. It will be your bandhu, or bandhu we also say brother, friend. The atma will be friend for one who has yena atmai atmana jita, who has conquered the mind. So if you can conquer the mind becomes your friend. Anatmanastu shatrutve. But if you fail to do, then he is shatru. Last verse, the word used was ripu. So ripu and shatru. So this verse is two times. So if you have failed to conquer the mind, then it will always behave like shatruvat, as an enemy. So, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, the purpose of yoga is actually to control the mind. Because as a soul, the Paramatma is always with the soul. But when the soul is bewildered by the mind, or the mind is not conquered, and mind takes the living entity to different directions, then we actually focus on the external things more. And then we cannot focus internally, because the focus is more on external sense objects and the situations, and we get disturbed by those situations, or disturbed means get carried away by those situations. So if something good happens, we are happy. If something bad happens, we are sad. So that this is all the emotions coming from the mind. Because we have very huge number of impressions stored in the mind, and the mind is like a machine used to work based on whatever stored in it. So we have to break that cycle, and this Ashtanga yoga is one of the way which the yogis used to conquer the mind. Conquer the mind means don't fail to the um, illusions or the promises of the mind. Then only you can conquer the mind. But when you avoid running behind the mind's desires or propositions, then we actually control the mind by our intelligence to focus on the higher thing. And then the mind itself will help us. So if you can win over the mind, it will be your best friend. And then um, the soul and the intelligence will operate the mind. So what is coming between us and the Paramatma is the mind. Mind takes us away from what we are supposed to do. So mind is so plays very important role, or it has very unique role to help the living entity, because mind is generated from the mood of goodness, so it can help the living entity, but if we can conquer it. So like yesterday we were discussing, to conquer the mind means to use our intelligence more. One of the way is Ashtanga yoga. But if you are, like yesterday we saw that if you are always engaged in doing some services physically for the God, then when your physical senses, eyes, hands, legs, everything is engaged for service, the mind automatically starts to think of the same direction. Why? Because then it is not exposed to the other things. So one of the way is this engagement of the mind in higher self. So Ashtanga Yoga also tries to um, control the mind by regulating. Okay? And so the same is done in Bhakti Yoga by uh, service to the Supreme Lord. So the point is Ashtanga Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is this thing automatically happens. Because Ashtanga Yoga is difficult because Krishna will explain how the Ashtanga Yoga practice is done. It's not so easy, and that we'll see in the next shlokas how this practice is done, and is it practical in this age or not. That we'll see in the next shlokas. But here Krishna wants to tell Arjuna that you conquer your mind because Arjuna, Krishna already told Arjuna in the second chapter. We saw that whatever reasons you are giving are not reasons of intelligent person. So he means to say, Krishna, Arjuna, you are not following your intelligence, but you are running behind your mind. What your mind is giving propositions, you are putting it in front of me instead of using your proper intelligence. So in our situation also, many times or most of the times, um, we run behind the mind. We many times it happens that we think we are using our intelligence, but intelligence driven by the mind is not using intelligence. Intelligence which drives the mind is proper intelligence. So many times we see some how the mind becomes the enemy is uh, mind drives the intelligence, and we wrongly think that intelligence is working. Actually it's the mind's impressions that are driving us to certain activities. So we need to observe that. So all these techniques or all these methods, how we can control the mind, or at least cool the mind, this will come in this chapter. When we do chanting, actually we can notice very well that if the mind is controlled, the chanting is easy. But when the mind is not controlled, chanting becomes more difficult. So in this chapter, that is the speciality of this chapter, that many practical tips or many instructions which can be directly applied in our sadhana. Mm. And so we'll see the shlokas and how we can apply as we move forward. And I think it helps a lot when we do our personal reading or chanting or any activity. Then at least we observe how the mind is deluding us. So here Krishna is telling, if you conquer the mind, it's your friend. But if you fail, then it becomes enemy. So in the next shlokas, Krishna will tell what happens, how we can know uh, that we are under the control of mind or not. So mind is our friend or he's not our friend. How to know this? So Krishna will tell that in the next, I think next couple of shlokas. Uh, so we'll let us see those shlokas tomorrow, and then we can actually see or experience what is exactly happening in our own individual cases. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. So any other points or any other questions or additions that we should observe or we should see when we move ahead with this chapter? Okay, thank you very much. One of the things we have to do in this situation of pandemic, and the situation is not so stable. So there also we need to see how our mind works. Uh, It makes us go outside. It makes us to do things that we are not supposed to do. And how the mind bothers us continuously. And it's also good learning experience, this pandemic situation. So we can use that also. So let us see more details about this from tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.